My name is Yehudis Komarow. I'm recording this L'Zecher Nishmas, my father, Avraham ben Godmeyer, and I'd like to preface my remarks with appreciation for my mother, Shatechia, whose dedication to keeping my father healthy definitely added years to his life. I am who I am, and my children are who they are, all very strongly influenced by Upa. One word summed him up: integrity. Use your mind and your heart to determine what is right, and then let nothing stand between you and that end goal. Here are some examples. My sister and I, Sara Lea, got a separate phone line because we talked so much, and he felt like we should pay for it. We worked. I wasn't happy that we had to pay each month, so I would give him the check and put in the notes section the word ogre, as if he was being an ogre to me by making me pay for it. He laughed about it and he teased me about it. And when I became a parent, I used that lesson. The lesson learned was that educating a child about values doesn't have anything to do with how much money you have, how much money you can spend. It has to do with principles, and you stick to those principles. Another example, he had a shir with the Rav of the community, and Upa was very, very, very smart, and he had many insightful questions. They were bomb kashas, as we called them, on the shir. I once talked to him about my frustrations with the shir I was going to and how I raised those questions during the shir, and he said to me, never, ever did I ask difficult questions in the shir in public, no matter how clear and how pressing they were to me. Kavod harav. I waited till the shir was over and then quietly asked. He passionately loved Eretz Yisrael. He went over there. He spoke his Tanachi Hebrew proudly, and he always talked about how much he would love to live there. He never forgave any country for the sins of their past against the Jewish people. He wouldn't travel to work to Germany or Spain. Germany offered him many goodies, free trips, to try to make up what they did, and he rejected all of them, saying to us he would never allow them to whitewash their misdeeds through any tacit approval of them by accepting any sort of payment. He loved learning Torah. Some of his favorites were Chassam Sofer, the Beis HaLevi, Minchas Chenach. He loved learning Maseches Eruvin, even though most people found it really hard. It was right up his alley. He loved the Seder, the Divrei Torah, the preparation. I remember him quoting the Gra, the Beis HaLevi, the Abarbanel. In fact, his last day in the hospital was during his limud of, I think it was Maseches Zvachim, and he could no longer speak, but we sometimes heard him repeating words to himself quietly, Behema Tahora, Behema Timeya, something like that, something to do with the daf he was on when he was taken to the hospital. He was a very strong person emotionally, and he showed kindness when appropriate. He was not an overtly emotional person, though, but in the last few years of his life, he would unexpectedly say, I love you. And I wish I could have a recording of those precious words, because he really did love us. He set the bar very high with honesty. I ran a gemach for children's clothing, and I poured lots of money and time and space into doing it as well as I could. And I asked him if he thought I could benefit from it by taking clothing for my kids. And I had a lot of good arguments for it, like it would make other people feel more comfortable. But his position was so strong, no one should ever be under the illusion that you did something that should have been lishma and you did it for your own benefit. It would mar the whole original effort and tag it as not pure. He did not easily spend money on himself, but if he was moved by a need, he would give others money, large quantities, quietly and without fanfare. He was very good at games like Scrabble, but because he was so honest and straight, he had trouble beating Uma, who was a little more willing to bend the rules. He always joked she was a Hungarian, and all Hungarian recipes start with, first you steal an egg. These are some of the thoughts in my head, but obviously there's so many more. I'm so grateful to Upa because He taught me that honesty and integrity and hatznei alechas before Hashem is the way to live life. And I hope that my children have picked that up through osmosis from Upa.
My father, Henry Adler, born Avraham Heinz, later called Henry Adler, was born June 26, 1932 in Berlin. His father was Max Goodmeyer, his mother was Rosie Reischa, and her maiden name was Lange. His grandfather, Gershon Lange, was the principal of the Hirsch School in Frankfurt. He was born in the early 30s, and in the later 30s, when the Nazis were in power, they came after his father. And he, his father, and one of his brothers, Moshe Zev, traveled through Europe until they got to Prague to take a boat to the United States. He always told us stories of how they slept in barns and they were dumped in the middle of fields. And then they finally ended up in Prague, where they davened in the shul of the Maharal, where the golem was upstairs, or so they thought. Then they went on a boat to the United States, where they were reunited with his mother and older brother Gershon and his younger sister Hannah. He always said he thought they were throwing him a party when they threw a parade for him when he arrived, because he arrived on St. Patrick's Day. As a child, he and his brother Moshe Zev were placed in an orphanage for a few years when his parents came to America, because it was very hard for them to take care of him and his brother. He seemed to be okay living there. He said he made friends with this large dog. He always had an affinity for Irish setters after that, because he really liked that dog. He went to public school in Washington Heights, and then Rav Friedler taught a bunch of boys in 90 Bennett in Washington Heights. And then he went to City College for engineering. At that time, City College had tons of frum people, and a lot of Jewish and frum people went there and got degrees there. He really did have the engineering personality. He once got a ticket going through a red light and asked the judge for full discovery for his red light ticket, and he spent hours and hours proving that the yellow light did not stay on for the required amount of time, and he beat the ticket. Upa really loved to learn. We never, as kids, went on trips on Sunday, because he had a chavrusa, David Lemberger, on Sunday for hours and hours. He would come at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and he would stay until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He gave tzedakah quietly. He gave to people who needed. At work, Yehudis and I had the privilege of working with him for many years at L'Oreal. He was always looked up to as being honest, brilliant in engineering. He had patents out there. People asked him for advice. He was like the guru on so many things at work. People really had a lot of respect for him. When he got older, he had trouble, not even so old, he had trouble with his heart. Uma put him on a very strict diet. It was the Ornish diet. He was not allowed certain fatty proteins. And it was really funny, because we would always catch him at chasnas with his favorite, meatballs. And he would say, "Really? It's not on my diet?" Sometimes he was a little forgetful of where he left things with that engineering personality. So he had numbers on all of the items he would take to work, so he wouldn't forget anything. Every morning he would go through, his wallet was labeled 1, his calculator 2, his keys 3. He used to lose his scarves often, and he would walk all the way back to his car, which was parked in the parking garage blocks away on more than one occasion. And he would check if he had left it there, because he never wanted to leave things. He valued his possessions. Upa really was an ish emes. He did the right thing. He was Yekish in that personality. He always learned. He loved his family. He would always leave the house in the morning and say, "Have a good day. And if it can't be a good day, let it be productive." Upa's neshama should have an aliyah and should be a melitz yosher for the entire family.